How's it going, everybody? Welcome to Virtual History 360. I'm Mr. Wade, and we are here to review for your North and South exam that is tomorrow or today, depending on when you're watching this. You could be watching it live with us tonight, or you could be watching this on replay. Either way, we're going to get you a review so that you can do awesome on tomorrow's test. So, it is 7:30. We're going to give everyone a few minutes to get the notification that we're live, and we will get started in just a few minutes. But to those early viewers watching, I do tell you that I've been working on pretty cool, in my opinion, a pretty cool video for this week that I think you'll enjoy. It's either going to come out tomorrow or Friday, depending. I'm going to look into some analytics before I release it, but it's definitely one you're going to want to check out. So, to my early viewers, got a handful of you in here. I think you're going to enjoy the video that comes out this week for the main channel. But that's not why you're here tonight. You are here to review our North and South unit. So I'll start by saying some ground rules. And I'll have to repeat these. Missed these. Logan, how are you doing, my friend? You doing okay? Well, it's good to hear from you. All right. Oh goodness, so many things going on. Ah, my goodness. All right, there was I. So, we are reviewing our North and South unit. Just want to bring up the scale real quick. Make sure I have everything in front of me here. I got notes. I've got the scale. I think it's this one here. Yep. All right. So, what do you say? 7:32 on my watch right here. There we go. Give everyone a couple minutes to get in. 7:34 we'll get our official start. So if you're watching this on replay, you can fast forward to approximately, oh goodness, what would that be? We'll say the 9-minute mark if you're watching this on replay. But yeah, so we're going to get started in just a second, but I do want to lay out some ground rules. I think I was going to get to this just a second ago. Big one is we're here to learn. We're here to review. So if you have questions, please ask them in the chat. If you don't ask, I can't answer. That's a great question. It's, a good quote I like is, a question unasked is an answer unheard. So even if you think, you're the only one, trust me, everyone's probably thinking the same thing if you're thinking it, right? So if you have questions, go ahead and ask them. All right. But reminder, we are here to, help each other. So ask questions, answer questions. If I ask them of you, I know there's a delay between when I say something to when you hear it to when you can type. I think it's like 30 or 40 seconds from when I say it to you hear it, and then obviously you have to have time to type it in. So if I ask a question, I'll give you time to type your answer. Excuse me. So that's okay. But don't put anything in the chat that shouldn't be there. I think that's, goes without saying, but yeah, it goes without saying. But if you're here to troll, just go home. Get out of here. Go somewhere else. That's not what we're here for tonight. We're going to work together and we're going to practice our history skills and go through some of the content. I got a list of notes here that I want to talk about. We're going to review some of the vocabulary. We got a lot to go over. It is now 7:34. So we got a handful of people in here. I'm hoping more people show up. I keep reminding you guys of these coming up, and everyone seems to forget. We get the replays, but man, I'd much rather you guys be here for the live stream, because man, that's incredible when you can ask questions and I can answer them rather than just watching a video reviewing, right? The Compromise of 1850 and the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Yes, I will happily go over that in just a minute, okay? But before I get to those questions, okay? So we're going to ask good questions. We're going to stay civil, no trolling, and we're going to go through the content. Like I said, I'm going to go through what the scale is. We're going to go over the vocabulary. We're going to go over the content. It is just about 7:35. Hopefully everyone's here. or more people show up, because man, remember that first live stream when we did this review and there was 20 of you and everyone was asking questions and it was going back and forth? That was awesome. We could do that forever, right? So if the questions don't keep coming, this is going to be a relatively quick night. Should be done in, I don't know, maybe a half hour from now. Okay, so let's get going. If you look at your scale for this unit, it's two power standards, 410 and 5.2, analyze the impact of technological advancements on the economy and slave labor, and analyze the role of slavery in the development of sectional conflict. Okay, we went through some of the vocabulary, sectionalism, the United States breaking into two. Obviously the West is part, but we're focusing on North and South. That's why we call the unit such. Okay. Just looking at the vocabulary list, capitalism. Remember, that's the economic system where individuals or companies own the means of production. We talked about industrialization or the Industrial Revolution. Factories being built, okay? Factories being built, people, paying people to work at a factory, but keeping the profit. And capitalism is driven by that need for profit, okay? Because the means of production are owned by private citizens who are trying to make money. Okay? Talked about slave codes, laws meant to, strict and monitor and control the enslaved population. We talked about the Fugitive Slave Act that was part of the Compromise of 1850 that goes along with fugitive. Runaway slaves could then be captured, even though they made it to northern states. And that goes along the idea of states' rights, the strict view of the Constitution that if it's not given to the federal government, that it belongs to the states. And then regulations going with that. Network, we talked about canals and railroads, right? And we talked about the telegraph connecting different places. And then justify, to give good reason for what you do. All right, so that covers the vocabulary. Now let's work our way up the scales, okay? We talked about the growth of industry and the impact it had. Canals, steamboats, okay? Canals with the water. Canals, artificial waterways, man-made rivers. Think of it like that. If you live near a river, you could easily travel to or from places. But if you didn't, it was more challenging. So by digging these canals, they could now float their products to market much easier, and it connected different parts of our country. Railroads kind of did the same thing, except without having to dig canals. It was cheaper and easier to lay rail lines and using the same steam engine from the steamboats to pull the locomotive. Steamboats allowed you to go faster, first of all, and then as well as upstream, and you could carry heavy objects instead of trying to row a boat, right? Along with those connections, like the railroads. Remember the Manifest Destiny, the American Progress by John Gass painting we looked at? You had the telegraph lines running alongside the railroads, kind of went hand in hand. Not telephone, not electricity, but telegraph, and then they would use Morse code. Let's see if I can make it sound. The series of dots and dashes so that they could communicate by tapping just a small electrical connection, not electricity like we know today, but telegraph, okay? Then you had Eli Whitney's contributions. One, the cotton gin. Okay, remember his idea was that if he could make a machine that could do the work of 10 men, that's 10 fewer enslaved people that would be necessary. Unfortunately for him, it didn't really work that way because they just grew 10 times more cotton. So they needed even more enslaved people to work out in the cotton fields. So the cotton gin actually increased the number of enslaved people in the country. So his idea didn't really work out the way he had intended. But it made cotton king. King cotton, we talked about this, 75% of American exports were made up of cotton. Okay? That's a big deal, right? All right? And then the next thing that Eli Whitney is known for is interchangeable parts. Remember we talked about this. He was given a government contract to build, I believe it was 100,000 muskets for the Army. Well, trying to find artisans that could make that many, it was going to take forever. It'd be too expensive. Again, capitalism, trying to make money. So he made it into a factory setup. He streamlined the process. Instead of one person making the entire product, they made the individual parts. And then once all the individual parts were made, they would then be assembled by someone else. That's the factory system, right? And not only did this make it cheaper and faster to produce, but these parts, instead of being individualized by whoever made them, were all the same. So if something broke, it was much easier to repair. Okay? So that kind of covers basically that. Okay. Let's see. Is that all I gotta talk about for level one? Let me think for a second. Yeah, we talked about more slaves because of the cotton gin, so his idea didn't come to fruition. Um, yeah, I mean, they made more and more money because they could process the cotton faster, so they grew even more cotton. Yeah, okay. And then moving on to the next level, I can identify the similarities and the differences of the North and South in the antebellum period. So, let's see. Let's cover this. I'll get to level 3, Clark. Don't worry. I will get there, I promise. Okay? But let's see what we got. Oh, I haven't checked on the screen in a little bit. Alright. Alright, got some. Not missing any chat. Okay. I kind of went on a roll there for about 5 minutes, so hope you're sticking with me. Remember, if you watch this on replay, you can watch this different parts. So now that was level 1. Let's move into level 2, or, the second level after vocabulary. I can identify the similarities and differences. So we talked about how the South was rural, the North was more urban. Does that mean it was all urban? No. Okay, not speaking in absolutes, but the industrialization of the North led more factories to be built and people to move to the areas where the factories were located. That's where those cities sprung up, and there was more of them. Okay? Then in the South, there were very few cities, mainly where the railroads crossed Atlanta, Nashville, places like that. Not many cities, they were mostly a rural agricultural society. Their economy depended on agriculture, whereas the North's economy depended on industry. There were farms, but the economy was based on industry in the North. The economy was based on agriculture in the South. Okay? Sorry, I got tickled in my throat. Give me a second. Let me take a drink of water. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Alright. Let's see. Ways of life. There was the hierarchy in the social classes, the wealthy at the top, and then you had the almond farmers at the bottom, but really, if you just understand, like, just how the lump it all together, if you think about it, if you go from rural to urban, from industrial to agriculture, and just, if you read a question, this is a test taking strategy, I'll give you this hint. If you read a question and you're stuck, just work your way and just kind of figure it out from there, okay? Again, not trying to give answers, but if you just think about the basics, okay? So really, that kind of covers, the North and South. That I need to cover for that level. That was a pretty easy level, but there's some more ideas, but I can cover that one in the next one, so I can get to what Clark was asking, okay? So let's see what we got. I can identify the compromises that delayed the Civil War. The Missouri Compromise, the Compromise of 1850, and the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Excuse me. Okay, so let's start with the Missouri Compromise. I know, Clark, you're hanging on. You're waiting for that one. I know. I'm sorry. Okay? Alright. But the Missouri Compromise was basically a way of delaying the war. This is early on. There were 22 states, and the 22 states were broken down 11 free states, 11 slave states, right? Kept a balance in the Senate. This is the way I explained it. If you had the same number of senators, right, you can't pass a bill because there was a deadlock. So if you think about it, if there were more slave states, so there would be more slave senators from slave states, just to be clear, okay? Then if the House passed a pro-slavery bill, then the Senate would pass it and slavery could expand. Northern states didn't want that. If there were more free states, then free senators, or senators from free states, then the House could pass the legislation, go to the Senate could pass a bill that was anti-slavery and could end slavery, sign into law. Southern states didn't want that, right? So what does that lead to? It leads to, train of thought. Yeah, trying to strike a balance. And this is 1820. This is early on. It's, 40 years before the war, right? So they agree that this Louisiana territory that we just purchased, this big area, they would just draw a line. Okay? And they said north of it would be free, south of it could be slave, with the exception of Missouri. Okay? Basically splitting it down the middle. Now, what about Missouri itself? Well, Missouri wanted to be a slave state and wanted to be admitted to the Union. It would upset the balance. So Massachusetts gave up the Maine territory. Maine became a state of its own, entered at the same time, free state, slave state at the same time. The balance remained. Okay? And that just kind of delayed the war because the status quo remained the same. Okay? Then you get to the Compromise of 1850, and this is kind of like an addendum the um, to the Missouri Compromise. Excuse me. But you got to think about what's going on. Okay? We have the Mexican-American War. We win. We get the huge area plan in the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, right? And now we have all this new territory to move west into. And then you have the gold rush of 1849 that we learned about. Well, with the gold rush of 1849, California's population grows so fast they can apply for statehood much earlier than they expected. If you think about it, you would expect the population to move west slowly, and then they can add states as they go. Well, here comes California all the way out on the west coast. So what happens? They apply for statehood. They were going to be a free state. They're north of the Missouri Compromise line, right? But it would upset the balance, the opposite of what Missouri was going to do, right? So the Compromise of 1850, Henry Clay again comes in to save the day, or at least delay the day of war. And he says, let California as a free state, but he'll make some concessions to the slave states. First, the territories of Utah and New Mexico, which includes present-day states more than those two, Arizona, Colorado, all that. But the territories were called Utah Territory and New Mexico Territory. And basically, they opened them up to popular sovereignty. They did not declare if they would be free or slave. This goes against the Missouri Compromise. But if you think about it from the southern point of view, you now have the opportunity to expand slavery to the areas north of the Missouri Compromise line. That's a chance you're willing to take, right? So you have California as a free state, but you now have more opportunity to grow slavery. So the South was okay with that. They also wrote a new fugitive slave law. Okay, they increased the harshness, I guess, if you will. Slave hunters were now given more freedom. It wasn't just, okay, if you find a runaway slave, you have to return. Now slave hunters were able to actively search for them in free states, okay? So we have these slaves running away. And obviously they couldn't just walk down the road. They had to do this in secret so they wouldn't get caught. And this is what the Underground Railroad was, right? Remember? Underground Railroad. Not like a real railroad. Not like the locomotives we learned about in level 1, okay? But the Underground Railroad referred to a chain of safe houses that people could go to, okay? These safe houses, I've actually been to a couple places like in Gettysburg. You can see where people would hide people away in cupboards and under the floors so that if slave hunters did come to look for them, they wouldn't find them. They would be hidden, right? Okay? So this fugitive slave law, coupled with the new territories being able to be voted on, popular sovereignty, the will of the people, that's the Compromise of 1850. Okay? Clark, is that getting to what you were looking for? Did that help you? I'm assuming you're still here, Clark. It's been a while since I checked on everyone. Right, but it delayed the war because, again, it made both sides happy. They got a free state, which upset the balance early, but the southern states got a little more concessions on their end. Okay? Alright, I got a handful of people in here. It's not a big number tonight, but a small number. I hope you guys are enjoying this. Alright, Clark says yes for 1850. Are there any questions? I'm going to pause for a second before I get to the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Are there any questions? Anything that you guys need more clarification or me to talk about? Because I'm just going through the stuff right now, but I mean, if you need help, remember, that's what this is for, so. It's a very quiet chat tonight. Drink water. All right. So the last thing I want to talk about is the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Now this covers a lot of time, okay? Because we're going to cover what the act was itself. How did it delay the war again? Okay, I see your chat. We'll double back. By maintaining the status quo. Because again, it was written by Henry Clay, right? But it wasn't the status quo in and of itself, but it was the same idea of the Missouri Compromise. It was like an addendum to, just to kind of fine tune it. But it delayed the. Thanks, Logan. Have a good night, bud. But it delayed it because it kept everyone happy. It kept them from fighting with each other. And that's when we get into the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Okay? So, the Kansas-Nebraska Act was kind of spurred on by a bunch of things. We're going to talk about the railroads. We're going to talk about, just the sectionalism and the division in our country, in Washington, in Kansas territory. We're going to talk about, Supreme Court case. There's a lot to cover here, okay? So, bear with me. Let's get started, okay? Kansas-Nebraska Act starts with Stephen Douglas, a senator from Illinois. Now, remember, we're dealing with the railroads during this time. They want to build a transcontinental railroad that goes from the east to the west. Wherever the railroads go, cities are going to pop up, commerce, money, right? So, Stephen Douglas says, why don't we build this transcontinental railroad around the northern latitudes, namely through his home state of Illinois? Well, southern states are like, well, no, we should build it through Texas. We just fought this war. We connect California through Texas and all the southern states. Again, they both wanted this first one. So what happens? Stephen Douglas says, how about a compromise? The Kansas and Nebraska territories, both north of the Missouri Compromise line, what if we open those up to popular sovereignty as well? Remember, popular sovereignty means the will of the people. Let them vote whether or not they're going to be a free state or a slave state when they enter the Union. Okay, well, they agreed. The South gave up the railroad in exchange for being able to vote on these new territories. Okay, think about it. Again, giving up a little, but getting a chance for something on the other side. That's why they agreed. That's why it delayed the war, right? Kept them from fighting. Bear with me, okay? But let's talk about what's going on. While all this is going on, you have the Supreme Court case of Dred Scott v. Sanford. Okay, this was a slave from Missouri, Dred Scott, who moved with his master to Illinois and then Wisconsin, free territories, and then when his master died, he sued for his freedom. Chief Justice Taney made a real big mistake. This is one of those cases the court got wrong, but he said that, ooh, you're at the game? Isaiah, how'd you guys do? I'm going to keep going, but tell me about the game. I'm curious. I'm obviously here. I'm not there. Taney messed this one up. He said, I'm going to end this discussion of slavery once and for all. Slaves are considered property. Property can't sue for freedom. Dred Scott should not have his freedom. Okay. So now you have the Supreme Court weighing in on this. You have senators from the North arguing for abolition and going against slavery. You have pro-slavery Southern senators arguing for the spread of slavery into these new territories. It comes to a head with Charles Sumner being attacked on the Senate floor. Remember, Sumner made some disparaging remarks against Stephen Douglas and, oh goodness, I can't think of his first name. I'm just going to say Senator Butler from South Carolina. Well, Butler's cousin, or kinfolk, I'll say, didn't like that, Preston Brooks. So he comes into the Senate floor, hits him over the head with his metal-tipped cane, knocks him unconscious, and beats him bloody. I told you the story of how he broke his cane in the attack, and all of his constituents, or not all, but a bunch of his constituents sent him new canes, and he was able to make a whole banister. All right. So, from that, I don't remember what day at this point. Let's just roll with it, okay? Where was I? So, we have senators beating each other. We have the Supreme Court weighing in, okay? And then, from that, we have Bleeding Kansas. John Brown. We're going to hear more about John Brown next unit, okay, because he's not done after this. But he's a big name here. But what you need to know is that a large number of people flooded into Kansas to vote in the election to decide whether Kansas was going to be a free state or a slave state. More people than lived there, right? To sway the election, both pro-slavery and anti-slavery. With all those people living in the area, tensions were high, and they clashed. Okay, you have, remember I told you the story of the printing press being destroyed in an anti-slavery newspaper office. Oh, I forget. It was basically the summer. I think it was May, maybe of '56, was where it was the first massacre or first attacks. I believe it was May through August. That's not, the dates aren't important. No, names and dates aren't important unless you can put a theme to them. Okay, that's why I tell you John Brown, because he comes back later. Okay, but and we talked about John Brown at Potawatomi Creek. You know, literally, him and his sons and his followers are going around from house to house of pro-slavery, and they literally at one point drug a man out of his home and hacked him to death with a sword in front of his family. And then in the retaliation, the fighting just got bloody. I told you can make an argument that the Civil War started here because it was slavery versus, or pro-slavery versus anti-slavery forces. Not an official war, but you get my point. This was a bloody event, okay? John Brown, wanted for murder, goes on the run. Not forever, he comes back, okay? But, yeah, Bleeding Kansas is a result of this Kansas-Nebraska Act. As a result of the division and sectionalism that comes out of, still actually a connection, okay, that comes out of, you know, this sectionalism and division in our country. You know, and again, it's not just isolated to Kansas. That's why I tell you the story of the Supreme Court. I tell you the story of Charles Sumner, right? Yeah. So I think that about covers everything. Compromise of 1850, really just compare what the North got to what the South got. The northern states got California. The southern states got possible new territories because of popular sovereignty, and they also got a stricter fugitive slave law. Okay? They were able to go after their runaway slaves. Okay? That's probably the most important thing you should remember about the Compromise of 1850, what each side got. Okay? So remember, the slaves ran away on the Underground Railroad. Slave hunters would be chasing after them. That's why they had to hide out in houses. You know, I forgot to mention Alexandria broke away from Washington, D.C. because they didn't want to give up the slave market in Alexandria. You know, that's capitalism. They were making too much money. All right, this all comes out of Compromise of 1850. How is Mexican War connected to Bleeding Kansas? If I answer this one in depth, I'll be answering your level 4. But think about it, okay? Think about territorial acquisition. I can give you that hint, okay? Think about our approach to the Mexican War and what we got out of it. Think about James Polk, okay? And think about what people tried to do in Kansas, all right? I think that's the biggest hint I can give you, Clark, because if I say any more on that, I'll be answering it, and then I'll have to give myself a grade, not you, okay? All right, it looks like everyone's still in here. Excellent connection, it says. All right, but I think I've covered everything on my notes. So really, let's open up to questions at this point. If you have questions, put them in the chat. Let me know if there's anything you want me to clarify. And I'm just going to open it up to you guys at this point. So let's see. How did a part of the city break away? Just like the rest of the country broke away. They said, we're on the south side of the Potomac River, and we want to join Virginia. And Virginia accepted them into their state. So now Alexandria is in Virginia. So if you look at, originally Washington, D.C. was basically just a square. And now if you look at it, it's 3 sides of a square, and then it follows the river, because Alexandria was on that south side there. Who made compromises again? The 2 names that you need to know, because again, they come up a bunch. And not that, you know, names aren't that terribly important to me, you know, it's ideas. But because I know you're going to be asked in high school and college, Henry Clay. Remember Mr. Betts' class song, the parody of Boys to Men, It's So Hard to Say Goodbye to Henry Clay? Okay, remember Henry Clay for the Compromise of 1850 and the Missouri Compromise of 1820, and then Stephen Douglas, who we're going to hear about him later as well, because Stephen Douglas and his Lincoln-Douglas debates in the 1858 election, running for Senate against Abraham Lincoln. So we'll hear about Stephen Douglas later too, so that's why he gets brought up. So Stephen Douglas and Henry Clay are the two names that you should know for that. Okay? So, ask questions, bring it up. I'm just going to kind of review everything again, but I'm here to answer questions. We've been doing this for about a half hour now, so if you've got questions, ask them. I'm just going to roll through my notes one more time, make sure we're all on the same page. We talked about the technological advancements. You had canals, man-made rivers to connect the country. Railroads also connected the country, transportation-wise. For communication, we had the telegraph. Remember the Manifest Destiny painting? American Progress shows Columbia with the telegraph line, right? To do with a T was... Clarify that for me. With a T was most impactful. I don't quite get that. Maybe it's a typo. I don't know. Clarify that question for me, okay? All right, we talked about Eli Whitney. Eli Whitney's a big name to know because of the cotton gin, which ended up as an adverse effect, but increased cotton production, king cotton, right? It led to the agricultural economy of the South, booming, and then in turn, the just increase in the domestic slave trade that came out of that, right? Let's see. Clark asks, for level 3, do I have to explain everything about the Kansas-Nebraska Act? Just give me the main points. You don't have to go into excruciating detail because I know there's a lot, but give me the ideas, big ideas, okay? Obviously, bleeding Kansas will be a part of that, and then the popular sovereignty. Those are the two big things I'm looking for level 3, okay? Were there any Southerners not happy with the compromise? Well, yeah, because they had to give up something. The Southerners that made their money on the railroads didn't want to give that up, right? Okay, a compromise isn't going to make everybody happy. All right, so think about that. If you try to make everyone happy, everyone loses. But if you try to make most people happy, that's when you have a chance. Okay? What compromise was the most impactful? Thank you. Okay. Now that question makes sense. Deep breath. Okay. What compromise was the most impactful? That's a great question. It really is, because I could make an argument for all three. I'm going to pick one. Give me a second. Let me think. If I had to pick one compromise as the most impactful, I would say Kansas-Nebraska, because it firmly cemented the idea that the Missouri Compromise was unconstitutional, which is what the Supreme Court ruled in the Dred Scott decision. It led to outright fighting and bloodshed. It really demonstrated the divide in the country. So I would argue that the Kansas-Nebraska Act was most impactful. Not to say the other two weren't, because the laws that were passed and you can't go wrong saying the Missouri Compromise because it started, right? And then Compromise of 1850 and, extending the power of the law for the southern states. I'm sticking with my answer, but that was a good question. All right. Clark's almost done with level 3. Was there fighting in Nebraska too? Not that I'm aware of. I'm not going to say no. I'm not going to give a blanket answer because I'm just going to say I don't know. All right? I can look into it real quick, I guess. Right? But not in the middle of stream. I don't want to do that. But take time. You guys want to watch me reading my screen? No. But that's a good question. Not that I'm aware of. Nothing big. Everything was in Kansas. Because the population hadn't made its way up north enough to declare statehood yet, as far as I know. So was there fighting? Maybe. But I don't know. Okay? Let's see, what did Clark say? I think it was the Missouri Act because it was the idea of where the equal power, and it goes through. Yeah, like I said, you can make an argument for all three. I agree with you. It's what started it. It's set the, established, that status quo that we talked about, right? So yeah, I agree. Okay. So we kind of hit those. Remember the North have more factories. You know, the lone mills. Remember we talked about the lone mill girls. You know, instead of child labor like in England. So they had the mill workers. How did Manifest Destiny impact the compromises? Not really, because everyone wanted to extend west. So did it affect the compromises? No, because everyone was on the same page of going west. All right, moving out west, establishing new states. It was whether or not we're focused on, you know, whether the new states would be free states or slave states, and that was really the argument here. So the compromises were based around that idea. So everyone was on board with Manifest Destiny at this point, really, or at least the people that were involved with all of this. Okay, the people against Manifest Destiny weren't the ones moving out west anyway, right? Good question, though. All right. So at this point, we are, 35 minutes in. So I'm going to say last call for questions. I know it takes time for you to hear what I say. It takes time for you to type. So I'll say last call now. Okay? And if you have questions, let me know. But yeah, I'm looking at my notes here. Everything that I wanted to talk about, I talked about. So yeah, I'm happy. Hopefully you're happy. Was Henry liked amongst people? Well, yeah, because he preserved peace. He was well respected. He was a long-term senator. You know, he served for a long time. He was respected among his peers. He was respected, you know, north and south. Obviously not liked for everything he did, but he was respected. Have I not posted level 3 on camp? I thought I did. I apologize if it's not there. Yes, I will do that as soon as I'm done with this live stream. Okay? I apologize. I thought I've done that already, so that's my fault. I will get that posted for you. Okay? What did Stephen Douglas do again? Well, he was a senator from Illinois, and he is one who crafted the Kansas-Nebraska Act as a way to bargain for the transcontinental railroad going through northern states, specifically through Illinois. So he made the deal that Kansas and Nebraska would be open to popular sovereignty in return for the first transcontinental railroad going through the northern states. Okay. Was Stephen Douglas a president? No. He was a senator. Senator from Illinois. And next year we'll talk about the Lincoln-Douglas debates when Abraham Lincoln ran for Senate in 1858. We'll talk about, you know, well, in the one song that Mr. Betts did, he quoted this one speech, you know, where Lincoln said, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." He believes that this country will become all free or all slave, but it can't be both. All right. All right. I'm going to say in 2 minutes, unless more questions come in. If we're not done in 2 minutes, you know, I'll keep going. But in 2 minutes, I'm going to wrap this up because that'll be about 40 minutes of live stream. Okay? Basically a class period, Wednesday class period, right? So, study your vocab, study your notes. Okay? Review everything. Hopefully you have all the level assignments done. Okay? You do that, you'll be fine on this test. Okay? You guys put in the time tonight to study. Watch this on replay. Skip ahead to like the 8-minute mark or so, 8 or 9-minute mark. All right, and then you know, get your rest. He was a Northern Democrat. It's more complicated than that, and that's more of a theme for next unit. Okay, so hold that question, Isaiah, because like I said, we'll talk more about Stephen Douglas next unit. So hold that thought. I'm not going. Let's not stress about that right now. Okay. But you'll be fine. Okay. So get your rest tonight. Oh, Isaiah, you never did tell me how you guys did on the game. But yeah, get your rest. Eat a good breakfast. Come rest it. Come with a full belly. And be prepared to be awesome on the test. I know you guys are going to be awesome. You're putting in the time to be prepared. I know you're going to do awesome tomorrow. All right. Why was there a fight? Because the Preston Brooks didn't like that Charles Sumner was making fun of his family, and it was a pro-slavery Preston Brooks versus an anti-slavery senator from Massachusetts, Charles Sumner. So he beat him. Yeah. Oh, he lost. Oh, I'm sorry. Was the Democrats or Republicans? No Republicans yet. Republican Party is just kind of getting started yet. Okay. Republican Party is just starting up. We'll talk more about the Republican Party next unit when Abraham Lincoln comes in, okay? Alright, guys, so we are 40 minutes and 45 minutes of live, but 40 minutes, and it's 8:10, so I'm going to end this here. Alright? Watch this on replay. Be prepared. I will see you guys tomorrow. For Virtual History 360, I'm Mr. Wade. Have a good night, guys.